we're going to keep going with our next portion tonight. Victor will be sharing with us from the all-inclusive Christ. So I hope we all have a pen. We can get ready to take some notes because after this, we will break into rooms to have a little bit of overflow of what we appreciated and also continue to get to know each other. Okay, so we're going to head right over to Victor.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Can you all hear me? I hope so.
Yes.
Great. Hey, everyone. My name is Victor. I'm on staff with the Christians on Campus Club at MIT. And I hope you are all able to catch Brian speaking last week. And if you were not able to, his speaking is posted online, actually, so you can find it on YouTube. But I'll be referencing a few of these points from what Brian shared. So if you could catch up, that'd be great. But anyways, I'll start with a recap. Last week, we saw a little bit of the children of Israel, the story of the children of Israel. First, they were in captivity in Egypt. And in captivity, then God raised up Moses, right? Moses. And then there's like all these plagues. And eventually they got out, right? So there's an exodus. And like Brian said, exodus, what do we think of? We think of exit. So after they're in Egypt, then there's an exit out. And then they were in the wilderness for 40 years. But that wasn't the end destination. They actually wandered around in the wilderness for 40 years. And eventually they came into the good land. And so this story, it's a journey. And we see in 1 Corinthians 10, 6 and 11, which says that these are examples to us. And so if you think of this as examples to us, this needs to touch us, because for an example to mean anything to us means we have to follow it, right? There could be tons of examples, but if we don't apply it, if we don't follow it, then it's not really an example to us. And so I want to consider that this journey that the children of Israel took shouldn't just be merely an interesting story to us. It really needs to be an example to us. And so as we saw, as they were on this journey, we saw many different types of Christ, starting with when they were in Egypt. They were eating the Passover Lamb. And last week, Brian held up a sign, right? The Passover Lamb is what? That's Jesus. And so we see in the New Testament that Christ, he's the Lamb of God, takes away the sins of the world. And in the wilderness, they ate the manna from heaven. And we see later in John, what is that? That's Jesus. He says, I am the living bread. So here we see a little bit like these are all types of Christ. But what was the goal? The goal was the land. So I want you to get this point. The goal is the land. And this land is also a type. And you can say that's Jesus. And that would be correct. But I think there's something particular. It's specifically called, this land is the all-inclusive Christ. So it's not like just Christ, it's the all-inclusive Christ. And so we need to consider this phrase, all-inclusive. When I think of all-inclusive, I think of something all-encompassing. I don't know, everything. It has to be all-inclusive. It includes what? Everything. So what does this mean to us? We saw many types of Christ, right? We saw that like he's the Passover Lamb. He's the manna. Later on in the journey, you see that he's the tabernacle. He's the offerings. He's the utensils. He's living water. He's light. All these are Christ, but we can't say any of these are all inclusive. So this is why the land is so special. The land of Canaan is a full type, an all-inclusive type of Christ. And so we need to be impressed. It's an all-inclusive type of Christ. And how does this relate to us? I feel like we can take this and just internalize it. I feel like we're all pretty smart here. It's like, okay, yeah, he's all-inclusive. That's great. But what does that actually mean to us? And I feel like this is when we really need to consider before the Lord. Yeah, you are all inclusive, but are you all inclusive to me? Are you everything to me? And I feel like we have to say that he's not everything, right? We want him to be more to us, but we still have much more of Christ to experience. And so I think as we're going on this journey together, we're scratching the surface of how rich Christ can be. Because I feel like all inclusive means everything. Can Christ be everything to us? I want Christ to be more to me, you know? So anyways, this is really important for us to see and for us to experience. And so we come to another verse, Colossians 2:6. This verse says, as therefore you have received the Christ, Jesus the Lord, walk in him. And so this shows that there needs to be some sort of response in us. We need to not just know, but we need to walk. I feel like it's not just a theory. This needs to be something that becomes an experience to us. And I think of it as, I don't know how many of you have been to the Grand Canyon, but it's like in Arizona, everything's just kind of flat. There's nothing there. It's just kind of flat. And then all of a sudden, like through the trees, it kind of opens up and you see like this awesome scene. If you've been to the Grand Canyon, it's quite remarkable, right? There's like this, it just opens up. There's this vast scene. And I feel like this is kind of like our experience right now, kind of like with like the children of Israel. We're coming into the good land and the scene is just opened up to us. And we see this vast Christ before us that we need to explore. We need to walk in him. And so let's dive in, right? As we come into this scene, how do we see more of Christ? And so there's this verse I like to read you. And I think by the end of this sharing, you'll be very familiar with this verse. This is Deuteronomy 8:7. It says, for Jehovah your God is bringing you to a good land, a land of waterbrooks, of springs, and of fountains, flowing forth in valleys and in mountains. So this first point I want to emphasize is this little phrase right in the beginning. It says, Jehovah your God is bringing you to a good land. It's a good land. And I feel like for us, good maybe is not so special. It could be like, hey, how are you doing? And you might just say, I'm doing good. That means it's not bad, but you know, it's okay. But for God, when God says something is good, it's pretty big. It's very good. Saw that with creation. He said it was good. With man, he said it's very good. So actually the Lord mentions that this land is good. And he mentions this again and again. So we need to see that this land is a good land. But how is it good, right? We're coming into this good land. We're seeing this vast scene. And we need to know, right? Christ is all inclusive, but how is he all inclusive? So he's so good. How is he good? And so the first point, okay, number one, come to. This is, let me read a verse in Exodus. Exodus 3:8 says, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and spacious land. So how is this land good? Here we see it's good in its spaciousness. There's another verse that I want to read. This is Ephesians 3:17 and 18. It says that Christ may make his home in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be full of strength to apprehend with all the saints what the breadth and length and height and depth are. So these are the dimensions of the Christ we have. Like how wide is the breadth? How broad is the breadth? How long is the length? How high is the height? How deep is the depth of Christ? It's in a sense, it's unlimited, right? Christ is so vast, so spacious that there's no limit to him. And I feel like this is something that it's kind of hard for us to comprehend. How do you comprehend something that is unlimited? I think of some experiences. I went up to Maine to a national park up there. I drove in at night into the entrance of the park, turned off the car, and then everything's pitch black. And I look up, it's just like stars everywhere. You just couldn't count. It just filled the whole sky. It's incredible. It's kind of what I think is like unlimited. Or I don't know how many of you are from the Midwest, but I saw like some of the Great Lakes. Standing on the shore of the Great Lakes, I wouldn't have known it was even a lake. It just seems like a stretch forever. But you know, these are just, I don't know, to show that there's no limit to Christ. And I feel like in our experience, what do we experience? We experience the limitedness of ourselves. So what about our patience? Maybe initially we feel like, oh yeah, I'm pretty patient. Then we get met with, I don't know, a tough homework assignment, someone that's difficult to be with. What happens? Our patience runs out. We can say, oh yeah, I'm a very loving person. I'm full of love, but what happens? Our love runs out. But we have Christ. Christ is unlimited. His patience never runs out. His love can never run out. This is a love where the dimensions are Christ. It doesn't run out. So Christ is so unlimited in his spaciousness. All right. So second point we're going to come to. How good is the land? Is good in its ascendancy. So the land of Canaan, it's a highland. It's at least 2,000 to 4,000 feet above sea level. And it's described as a land of mountains. So in the books of Deuteronomy and Ezekiel, it contains many passages that talk about how the land of Israel is a mountainous and it's a high country. But what does this typify of Christ? In order to see something of this, we need to look at a map. So there's Israel. You can say Israel's in the middle. On one side, we have the Mediterranean Sea. On the other side, we have the Dead Sea. And in the Bible, the seas signify death. Okay? So we have Christ surrounded by death. But what is this? Out of death, Christ rose, right? So Christ is this high land, a land of mountains. This typifies resurrection. He's rising up out of all the death situation. Christ is like the high land, like the mountain of Israel. So outside of him, there's nothing but death. But with Christ, he rises above, towers above death. And how does this relate to us? I think of it, sometimes it's like we need to apply the facts or state the facts. Satan always comes to us to keep us down. He comes to accuse us. But for what? We need a little reminder. Don't forget where you are. When we contact Christ, where are we? We'll be in the high mountains. We're not in that death situation. In that moment, we have these problems. It seems like that's all we can think about. These situations comes, it hits us. That's all we can think about. But we just need a little reminder. At that moment, we can turn. We can come to Christ. We can apply Christ. And what does that mean? We apply a Christ that is the ascended Christ, a Christ who is over all these situations. And so this is another aspect of Christ that we can apply. Third, we see how is this good land so good? It's good in its unsearchable riches. And there's many aspects to this. This land, I think in the next few weeks, we'll be covering many other aspects of this land. But the first one I want to mention is this matter of water. And specifically waterbrooks, springs, fountains, and streams. So again, we come to that same verse, Deuteronomy 8:7. For Jehovah your God is bringing you to a good land, a land of waterbrooks, of springs, and of fountains, flowing forth in valleys and in mountains. So waterbrooks means full of springs, full of streams of water. And so This land, you just think of it, it's a land full of, I don't know, streams. There's just water everywhere, full of water, and it's of springs and fountains. You might ask, what's the difference, right? Why does it mention springs? Why does it mention fountains? Earlier, we sang a song, right? In that song, we talked about Christ has come to be life, right? And it says, the Father is the source, a fountain emerging to be. God the Son is as a gushing up spring. The Spirit's a river for life imparting. So according to the song, it seems like there's a fountain, and then springs, and then river, right? So fountain, spring, river. But as you're getting to this rooted packet, I hope you guys notice there's some additional reading, right? And this is from the book, The All-Inclusive Christ. But if you read that, it seems like the order is a little bit different there, right? The order seems to be spring, then fountain, then stream. So I just want to bring this up so that you won't be hung up about this. In a sense, don't worry about what these terms are. What is the main thing? The main thing here is that we need to see that there is a source of water deep underground. So first there's a source. Remember that. First there's a source deep underground. And at a certain point, like the water, it'll have to come to the surface. So as it comes up, it'll eventually break the surface. And then out of that, there'll be a flow. So if you remember this principle, then I think you'll get the main point. And how does this relate to our experience? So let's say we're feeling a little dry. We're feeling a little thirsty. So what do? We turn at this moment. We come to the Lord. We contact the Lord. And then this is like coming to this deep source. We're coming to the Lord. And then as we're contacting him, we're getting refreshed. You can say we're getting filled. So like from the source, we're getting filled up. So it's like this living water is filling us. And eventually what happens? There'll be an outflow. There'll be a flowing out of this living water to others, even to the ones around us. And so in our experience of the Lord in this way, there's many experiences. So if you look at the verse, it says, for Jehovah your God is bringing you to a good land, a land of water brooks, S, plural, of springs, plural, and fountains, plural. So it implies there's many water brooks, many springs, many fountains. And this matches our experience of the Lord. At this moment, for example, we touch the Lord deep within us as our joy. And as this joy is rising, bubbling up within us, filling us, what happens? Then it comes out and then it flows out as joy. Same with peace. Once we enjoy the Lord as our peace, from deep within, we're experiencing him as peace. He fills us with peace till we overflow what? Peace, grace, light. I feel like all of these aspects of Christ, these are just many different water brooks, springs, and fountains. There's so many experiences of Christ that we can have. And what's awesome is this isn't just for us, right? Out of our experience, out of our enjoyment of the Lord, there'll be an outflow. We get filled with him, and there'll be an outflow of the living water to others. And the last point that I want to talk about is it's good in its unsearchable riches. It's good in the valleys and mountains. So again, we come to that same verse, Deuteronomy 8:7. The verse ends with flowing forth in valleys and in mountains. So notice the order here. What does it say? It says flowing forth in valleys and in mountains. So first is what? First is valleys. And this is actually very sweet because sometimes we think of mountains as like a very high experience, valleys as like a low experience. But where's the stream? The stream is found we encounter the stream in the valley. So even in our valleys, we encounter the stream. As we follow the stream up, where do we get to the source? We end up in the mountains, but we meet the stream where in the valleys. So this is so sweet. We saw earlier, this mountains are this experience of resurrection. You could say these valleys are the experience of the cross. But These two experiences, they go together. We must be those who are always experiencing valleys and mountains. Notice how it doesn't just say valleys, period. It's not flowing forth in valleys. It doesn't say flowing forth in mountains. It says flowing forth in valleys and in mountains. So in our experience, they must go together. As we experience the Lord, it's our Christian experience, I think it's just made up of so many of these valleys and mountains. In a sense, it's like kind of up and down, but you realize in the experience of valleys and mountains, where is there? There's the experience of the living water. Here in all these highs and lows, we come to the Lord, experience him take him as the cross, experience him as the cross, experience him in resurrection. What's the end result? We're filled, more experience of the living water that's flowing in the valleys and in the mountains. So I hope you guys all had a little bit of a view of how rich, how all-inclusive this good land is. This all-inclusive Christ is before us. Now we need to just go forward and walk in him and experience him. And I hope in the next few weeks, we'll be able to see much more aspects of how rich, how Christ can be everything to us. All right. Do I pass it back to Hiram, or what are we doing?
Yep, throwing it back to Hiram.
Awesome. Thank you, Victor. I hope that the Lord is bringing us, even tonight, he's bringing us into a good land, a land of water brooks, of springs and of fountains flowing forth in valleys and in the mountains. I believe that a lot of us listening to this word, even starting from the singing time, we were up in the mountains, right, full of joy and joy flowing out of us. So I hope that, we would all continue to enjoy this matter throughout the week. Just a few announcements before we break up into breakout rooms. First is, if you have not received an email from us, from any christiansoncampus@gmail.com, please check your spam folder, okay? We've been sending reminder emails, but in case you haven't received them, it might be in your spam folder. If it's not, please contact us, okay? And also to remind everyone that we have podcasts, okay? You can find them. Maybe David can share the screen to show you how you can access them. We have podcasts through Spotify. You can go on anychristiansoncampus.com also, and then there's a tab on the right corner. It says podcast, and then you can follow. So you can follow them. We have 4 lines. We have Morning Dew, Keep the Feast, Deeper, and also question and response time, okay? We highly encourage you all to listen to them. But for the 4th podcast, for question and response, okay, we need y'all to submit some questions. And if you have any questions regarding your personal, experience or anything related to the world situation today, I know we are living in a very confusing times. But if you have any questions on anything, you can submit your questions on anychristiansoncampus.com. If you go to the podcast tab, and if you scroll down, there's a link there. It says, click here to submit your questions. And for our job is not to answer all your questions. Only the Lord can answer all our questions. But it opens up a line of fellowship to really respond to a lot of the questions that you guys might have. Okay, so we highly encourage that you take advantage of this opportunity to ask questions, and we'll record it through a podcast, and you guys can listen to them. Okay, and 4th, if we hope that all of you guys are getting into the daily bread in your material in your packet. Okay. Those are I've heard some encouraging reports from students that are, enjoying the daily bread materials. So if you need help getting into it, call someone in your group, mention it to your group. Maybe 1 or 2 of you guys can get together and read it together, so you can use it not just for yourself, but you can use it also with one another. Okay. So We'll now break out into breakout rooms. So use this time again to get to know one another, share your enjoyment, highlights, tips, whatever you guys, however you guys want to use it, okay? And we won't be returning afterwards, so feel free to take however long in your breakout rooms, okay? It's good to see everyone. Keep feasting, keep enjoying. Hope to see you next week.